Hello, my name is Mariusz and in this video I'll be making a piece of paper terrain that can be used in D&D, any other ttrpg, or even some kind of wargaming stuff like Warhammer. First, I measured the overall size for this build to match a 28mm minis. Here I have my paper mini to check for scale. You can see how I made it in my previous video. Now I'm thinking where to put the door. The right side should be okay. And of course, when trying to be lazy and make them as wide as the ruler, they look kinda wonky, so I erase part of it and draw it again. Then I make a room for a window. Nothing too fancy in this first build. My idea for this building is to make it some kind of post-apocalyptic shelter reinforced with whatever was available at the moment. So here I sketch metal bars to protect the window and some metal plates on doors corners. After finished sketching, I think that it would be a brilliant idea to make the door and the window separate, to give the building more depth. In the end, I think that it was unnecessary, but well, now it's too late. Now I draw a basic brick texture just to add some details on the walls. When the sketchy part is done, I grab my 0.1mm pen and start to do the outline, trying to add a bit of texture and extra details like scratches or just random lines in random directions that just feel like they could be there. When drawing windowsill, I tried to think that it would be easy to fold it into a tiny long rectangle, so I added extra parts for sides and front of it, as well as some paper flaps to better glue it together. Little did I know that the thickness of this paper would definitely win with my precision, so in the end that also could be skipped, but overall it wasn't any kind of disaster, just a little pain in the butt. After finishing the brick outline, I grab a thicker pen to fill the gaps and make the brick look a little bit less regular. I'm pretty sure that I wanted to add some cracks here and there on these bricks, but chances are that I simply forgot and moved to the next step, which is to make a back wall of this building. While the process was the same for the front and sides, I went through it quickly, and since it's a mistake after a mistake, I went to the cutting without leaving any extra piece of paper on the sides to help it glue together later. And my brain went, I see the line, I cut the line. After cutting everything, I realized that I completely forgot about erasing the sketch from the paper before cutting, which would be a bit quicker than going through it at this stage, but I managed to do it anyway. I could leave the sketch, but my markers don't cover it, so it would just look bad. And now to the windowsill. I put it under my ruler and fold it to make a 90-degree angle between the top part and the front part. Now I cut the sides to separate the side part from the flaps that go under it, but since this is so tiny and paper is so thick, it looks just not as I imagined it would. Leaving that alone, now it's time to grab a thick black marker and make all the edges black. This really makes everything look way better, so there is no point in not doing it. After going through every element, now it's time to think about roof and that sweet post-apocalyptic reinforcements. I grab a piece of paper and sketch a very long rectangle with a bunch of vertical lines, which later become a very long metal sheet that can be cut into pieces of different shapes and sizes. Then I start sketching many more or less random rectangular shapes that will be thicker metal plates and wooden planks that will be used to cover this little house to at very least protect it from not too heavy rain or other mild weather conditions. Now I go back to the long metal sheet and mess up all the lines just to be consistent with my lack of drawing anything straight, adding some thicker dark spot to indicate holes. After that, I turn this piece of paper back and do a quick outline for each and every piece of something that I sketched earlier. When that is finished, I finally proceed to something interesting, which is to make these weird shapes look like actual pieces of metal and wood. To do so, I mark the thicker edges and potential bolts and scratches for metal parts and basic wood texture for wood. Now it's time to start adding color, since it should be easier now before cutting everything out, but of course, just as I start doing so, the stroke of genius comes upon me and I erase the pencil sketch before going on with the coloring. So I make a base layer of gray for all metal parts and a bright sand-like color for wood. When that is done, I go back to a metal sheet and start to put orange in random places to indicate how rusty and old that part is. Of course, adding just one color would make it look sad, so to make it more happy, I added another shade of orange and even some green. It could be an old paint or moss or some toxic something in whatever fantasy catastrophe you can think of. For the wood, I added dark brown in some places, followed by bright orange, which in the end looks too bright and vibrant for me, but if it's on the paper, then it's on the paper, so the wood from which these planks are made is very special. Then, for the metal plates, I added a bunch of colors to make them look like all of them are scrapped from different places. The gray underneath makes the colors more desaturated, so it blends nicely with each other. When that is getting dry, I go back to the long metal sheet and add some more detail with black pen, followed by some highlights with a white jelly pen on top. Then I add highlights for all the metal parts, drawing them mostly on top left edges and on some cracked edges to make them pop. With that, the coloring for all of this is done and it's time to cut. I start with cutting out the metal sheet and I grab my X-Acto knife to cut some rough edges to strengthen the illusion that these pieces of poorly colored paper are in fact old rusty metal sheets that can be used to cover a shelter in a post-apocalyptic world. Then I roughly cut all the other elements to make it easier to cut precisely without bending and folding them. Since these shapes are quite basic, the scissors make the job easy and fast. After everything is cut, it's time to color the edges black to make it look a little bit extra. And now back to what I started with, which are the walls. First I color it with a base sandy color. Then, waiting for it to dry, I grab the door and paint the frame brown and the door itself light blue. I switch between pieces to give them time to dry so the paper won't fold as much. The window also gets its frame brown and the glass blue. Since I don't like the windowsill as much, it gets basic wood colors and that's it. Now back to the door, I add blobs of orange to indicate rust. Then I color the window bars black. To add more depth, I add some shadows on the bottom parts of the bricks. Now adding some detail on the window, and right after that I grab my white pen and start to add highlights on edges. The paper did get a little wet, so I tried to straighten it as much as I can before checking once again how the door and window fit and gluing it together. I use PVA glue since it sticks to the paper quite fast, is much stronger than a glue stick and doesn't leave gaps like two-sided tape would. I try to spread the glue evenly and then press pieces together to avoid leaving gaps. When the door and window are in place, I fold the sides of the building and grab a black marker to make some thicker lines on corners. Then I grab the back side of the building, straighten it and realize that I did not add those flaps to stick both parts together. Being a massive overthinker, I came to the idea that I can reinforce everything by gluing paper squares in each corner, which also allow me to glue the back side together, so overall not a bad solution. Now that I have all four walls together, I can make a roof. So I grab a piece of paper that is roughly the size of my little house, put some pool of glue next to me and start gluing random pieces of metal sheets and metal plates so they all can merge into one, not so beautiful but quite functional roof. Of course, I add some smaller elements to add more details, giving an impression that someone actually uses this shelter and cares about it to cover its holes. When the glue on the roof is doing its job and drying, I grab the base element and start adding more metal plates to also make everything look more interesting and post-apocalyptic. Not last but definitely the least, I glue the windowsill below the window. Maybe it's not as bad as I thought. And finally, after all this, I put some glue on top edges of the building and cover it all with this gorgeous roof. With that, this little house is finished and someone can try to hide in there, assuming of course that there is no current hiding person which can spot anyone approach and everything can go messy. Either way, thanks everyone for watching, I hope you liked the result. If so, click like, subscribe, comment and have a wonderful day. Bye!